Welcome back, everybody, to Sia Nejad Sports. And I've got a really special guest today. So let me go ahead and introduce him right now. It's none other than, and I've done so many shows with him at this point, it's none other than Debro, otherwise known as Derek Brown, sporting the Giants jersey. Derek, how are you?
Doing good, Sia. Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to get into the throes of baseball season. I don't really do I don't do any fantasy stuff, but I've always been an avid sports fan, and especially Giants baseball. Uh, Shoot, man, as long as I can remember back when I played.
Let me ask you this, because most people know you as a football analyst
hmm
for Fantasy Pros. And I honestly, I think that's really selling you short. But I don't know what you call yourself. I mean, I call you a scout. I call you an analyst. I call you a commentator.
All of
What,
those things.
okay,
All of
fair
those
enough.
things. I mean, look, it's really funny. Like Fantasy Pros was like, whenever I took the job here and job descriptions and stuff like that, they're like, how do you want this to be sifted out? And I was like, I don't know. You just put me as doer of things.
Hmm.
Whatever works, man. Because yeah, you wear a lot of different hats in this industry. So, and I have throughout the time through all of it. So yes, I mean, I just prefer doer of things.
So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on this show, I mean, first of all, I met you through Frank Stanfill when we were doing
Oh,
Fantasy
Frank.
Football Today DFS, and we were trying to, think of guests to do in our like to have for our offseason series. And Frank mentioned you and was super excited to have you on the show. And I hadn't met you at the time. I just know I knew you had a big presence on Twitter and things of that nature. But you've now done a few shows with me at this point, and I definitely, and I'm not really just limiting this to Twitter and the fantasy community.
hmm
I definitely see you as just one of the more positive people that I've come across. And frankly, I don't know if that, we all have our sort of our outward, visions that we project out into the world. And I just really wanted you on the show to maybe get to know you a little bit more, because I think that positivity, like one thing we do on Sia Nejad Sports, where we talk about healthy habits, we try to create healthy habits, we try to motivate and inspire people to like get beyond the first step. Derek, I think one of the big problems with people, and includes me, it's everybody, is that they have a really good idea and they want to put it in play, and they
hmm
take maybe a step or two to put it in play, but unfortunately for them there's like 10 or 20 steps to take.
Yeah.
And getting to that final step, or even getting like halfway through, it's just hard for people because they figure out ways to almost take themselves down, take themselves out of the running by like making up excuses or whatever it is. So that's like part of the mantra of this Sia Nejad Sports project, is to get people to move forward. And the reason I lace in positivity there is I think if you're just a generally positive person, at least outwardly positive to other people,
hmm
I think that resonates with people. I think it's inherently motivating. And I wanted to ask you before we get into your background, because I think your background's incredibly interesting. Where does that positivity come from? I know that's such an open ended question. Have you always been like that? Did it take a certain gaining of perspective for you to be like that?
I mean, I'd love to sit here and tell you. I think you're being effusive right now. Like I love it. I appreciate it. I would love to sit here and tell you that I view myself as a positive person. Honestly, I look at myself as I'm just as much of a flawed individual as everybody else, man. I think that really what it comes down to, and a lot of really honestly with Twitter and social media and all these different things. I mean, I've always just strived to be me. Because honestly, you start playing a character, you start doing all these different things, and eventually there's gonna be cracks in the pavement. You can't keep it up. You feel like you're not being who you are and stuff like that. So for me, in everything I've ever done in this space and just in general, like I try to be me at all times. Like I'm not gonna be everybody's favorite cup of tea. Nobody is,
Mhm.
man. That's just life. But I do believe in karma. I'm a big believer in that, and I do believe in paying it forward. So for me, a lot of the things that have happened, whether you want to talk about life wise, you want to talk about in the sports and fantasy industry, has really come down to either people doing me a solid and giving me a leg up, or pulling me up by my damn bootstraps whenever I thought I mean, there's been times, and I'm not even kidding, man. I know I'm gonna get us off the rails here. There have been times through all of this. You talk about like people taking the first two steps and then falling off the wagon or just losing interest and stuff. There's been one or two times during all of this where I've either called somebody, a friend in the industry, or I've been at that moment. Like I can remember adamantly one point where 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're half a bottle of, halfway into a bottle of bourbon. And I'm just like sitting there staring at my phone, thinking about just deleting it and saying the hell with this. I'm just going to disappear off into the ether. I'm not there now, but I've been there, so for me, it's just taking life's bumps and bruises and you just try to keep trucking, dude.
It's interesting because I think one of the reasons I find you to be a positive person is because you're so accessible. I think like I've seen you do your Twitter spaces, for example, like mostly during the football season. You probably do it, non-football season too. I know you all
Mhm.
just had a draft with the fantasy pros with the NFL draft and all that, but
Mhm.
I've listened in. I don't have a lot of time in my schedule, but there have been times where I'll listen in and it'll be like an hour and a half through. And you're like, you know
Yeah.
what? I'm going to wait here until everybody's done asking questions or until I
Yep.
feel like I've answered. And maybe positivity is the wrong thing, but I think that type of accessibility, I'm just very drawn to that because I just don't think
Mhm.
that people really want to engage like that. And I guess maybe I should reframe the question. Is that type of accessibility you kind of just paint it forward? Does that come from, people that when you were trying to carve your own path, that they did
Mhm.
that for you, or maybe they didn't do that for you and you turned around and said, you know what, I need to be that guy because there's not enough of those guys out there or girls out there.
The way that I'll look at it honestly is I feel like we can all take things for granted in life, especially when you're going through the day to day. We all kind of get lost in our day to day bubble of stressors and time and tasks and all these different things. But man, like a lot of the way through with like how my life has evolved and how things have gone throughout the years, it really comes down to I feel blessed to do all this stuff. And I know
Mhm.
that sounds so freaking cliche, man. I
But I
know
get it.
it is,
I
but
understand exactly what you're saying.
I feel blessed to do all this, man. Like I would not have these opportunities and not call this my full-time job. What I do on a daily basis would puts food on my family's table without the support of other people out there, people reading my work, asking questions, giving a crap about this game about a game. And I'm not even kidding, man. Like to me, it still astounds me after like doing this for 6 years, being full-time in the industry and stuff like that. I'll be honest, it still really floors me that honestly that anybody gives a shit about what I have to say.
Right.
I still deal with imposter syndrome because it's like when you do this stuff in the sports industry, like I don't come from a background of like I played football,
Mhm.
I did this, I did that. I don't have a degree to show up and back up like, yeah, you know what, or or certification to back up like I actually know what the hell I'm talking about.
Mhm.
So that's probably gonna live with me until I take my final breath, just that feeling of imposter syndrome, So for me, all of that accessibility that you're referring to, I love doing spaces, man, because I look at it as like people support me for my work. It allows me to basically live this dream that I'm living
Mhm.
right now and do what I'm doing for a daily, like to call my job. I love like I what it's honestly one of my favorite things to do during the NFL season, off season, what have you, is to do spaces. I just love talking to people. Like,
Yeah.
half the time during those things, like people will hop up there and I'll see the same people in it every single week. And so whether it's me giving them shit, ribbing them about something or whatever, like that it's just connection. And to me, like that matters to me because if it wasn't for everybody out there hopping in there, hopping in stuff or doing, like basically interacting with me, my content, asking me stuff, whatever, I wouldn't be doing this, man. So like I don't take that kind of support for granted.
So you mentioned that for 6 years you've been doing this full time. Prior to that, what were you doing? Because I think it's important for people to know, and I know it wasn't you haven't been doing, fantasy and football your entire career. You know, my I was a you might know this, Derek. I was an attorney and then I practiced for 13 years. Then I went into pharma sales and then I decided I
Okay.
wanted to do this full time. And I would have never thought, 15, 16 years ago when I was in law school, I'd be doing this, but I ended up just kind of going to what I love to do. And it's not just football and sports in general. It's also connecting with people, like you said. And I like connecting with people inside and outside of sports, to be honest with you. But what's interesting about you is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you
Mhm,
were in pediatric oncology prior
mhm.
to your current career.
Yep, I was in, doing that for so, yeah, a quick rundown, like, I've been full-time in the industry for 3 years, I think, and I've been writing for, like, another I've been writing oh god, there's an Instagram post out there since 2015, 2016, something like that. That's when I love that I had the clairvoyance of whatever to just happen to post that on Instagram when I did, because now I'm able to, like, kinda track that because, I mean, you know it, man, like, the older you get, things and dates and all that kinda stuff kinda float away and stuff, so, I've been doing this in totality for about 7 years, 3 years full time. And yeah, before that, man, and I still got my nursing license. It's still current. Um, I worked at a St. Jude affiliate in Baton Rouge, Louisiana for 12, 13 years. And then I live currently now in DFW. And what brought me here, I actually moved here for like a nursing management job and stuff like that. And so I did that for a few years over here, but I loved my time doing pediatric oncology, man. That's probably, I mean, outside of doing this for a living, one of the highlights of my life. Like when I got that job, it was something like I thought I was going to retire doing that. Like I thought I was going to be 60 years old. And they were going to have to wheel me out to my car to say, look, like you you can't come in here anymore. I loved it with every fiber of my being, man. And it's really like I got into nursing because, again, at the core of it, I wanted to help people. And I felt like just my personality, like, I didn't wanna sit here and work with adults, dude. Like,
Mhm.
I went into, pediatrics and oncology not only because I wanted to come home at the end of the day, and again, I sound like a damn billboard. I hate it, but it's true. Like, I wanted to come home at the end of the day, and that's why, like, I went into nursing originally with, like, to be able at the end of the day, whether it was something, like, small or minute, to be able to come home at the end of the day and be like, "I helped somebody." Like,
Mhm.
whether it was something tiny or something grandiose, I felt like I actually helped somebody, and I felt like nursing was gonna allow me to do that, and then I went into peds because it's just the connection that you form with those children and their families and stuff. Like, you care for people for years. Years, man. Like, and to know some of those kids and those families just as well as you know your own, I mean, it matters, man. Like, I still have connections to doing, like, with that previous life of doing working for St. Jude and stuff like that. Like, I just, um, stood in on a nursing lecture about 2 weeks ago and got to reconnect with one of the families that I took care of during my time there and stuff, and I'll never forget those relationships and stuff. I'll carry that with me forever. It's something I loved it.
Can I ask you a little bit about that
Yeah.
profession?
Mhm.
Because you talked about how much you love the job, and
Yeah.
to me, that means you were so fit for that job. Because from the outside looking in, to me, it just seems like such a mental anguish, mental hardship type of
Mhm.
situation that you just basically immerse yourself in, knowing that and maybe I'm mischaracterizing this, but it seems to me that if you're in pediatric oncology, you are dealing with a lot of families and specifically children that do not have it very good in those moments, and maybe have few moments to go. And I just wonder if how that shaped you. Maybe I mean, obviously you knew that going into the job, but
Yeah.
I again I characterize it as a really tough job. Do you not see it that way because of the impact that you were having?
I think that from the outside looking in, I think that's the general perception of it, and it's not a wrong perception. There's a lot of stuff that's really tough to deal with in that field, and it can be very, very hard, and it can be emotionally draining, and it can be very difficult, but in doing that type of medicine and caring for families and people, at these various stages of life and stuff, that's something, I mean, you're seeing people in their most vulnerable moments. Like, and now when I have kids, like, I look back on and I can't even imagine, like, it's kind of weird for me to like think like, okay, at one time that was my job, but
Mhm.
when I was doing it, it's not doom and gloom. It's not this sadness. It's not all that. Like that specter is kind of sitting in the back of the room and stuff like that. And it's there, and it's not like Voldemort, like that should not be named. But it's something that is there, but you still have to continue on with life. Like
Yeah.
you've either got one or two choices, man. It's like either you're gonna fight and you're gonna live, or you're gonna throw in the towel. And it's honestly to watch and live that and go through that and walk that path, or at least help families walk that path, kids walk that path. It's honestly a blessing in the sense that you really do see how strong people are and
Mhm.
how people persevere. And it's, I mean, and I guess that's one of the things about pediatrics. Half the kids that are going through treatment and stuff like that, 3-year-olds with leukemia, things like that, like, there's a lot of times where kids are just running around being kids, man. Like,
Yeah.
you wouldn't know outside of like, okay, they got no hair, like that anybody that they're sick, that anything's wrong, that like, whatever is going on in their lives is going on, because they just keep trucking. Like they just keep moving past it, man, like, and living through it. And I mean, it's inspiring in a lot of ways. And the other part about it is like you get to know these families and these children, and it's that type of connection. It means a lot. Again, I've never sat on the other side of the aisle, but I can speak from my vantage point. Those connections, while I think that they've meant a lot to families, it's meant a lot to me. I mean, again, like, shit, I'm almost 40, man. Like, doing that for almost a quarter of my life shaped the person that I am. It shapes how I
Mhm.
view the world. It shapes, all types of things. And yeah, I mean, it could be a tough, very tough position and field to work in, but also it's so damn rewarding, man.
Mhm.
Like, to see kids getting better or be able to go home at the end of a long chemo treatment, to sit there at somebody's no more chemo party and watch them ring a bell, and to see them after they've completed treatment, that, years later, like, I don't know, man. It's powerful.
I have a somewhat unfair question because I don't
Mhm.
even know how I'm going to articulate this exactly, but not everybody gets the perspective that you have because of your profession. And maybe again, maybe you had that perspective to some degree coming into the job, and that's what drew you to that field.
Mhm.
But certainly coming out of that job, I would imagine you have a just slightly different perspective than most people. Is
Yeah.
there just from that experience, is there anything for you to impart on anybody that's listening to this show now or in the future that like for example, I would think that somebody in your position, one of the things I know we've gone through some cliches here, but one of the things would be like, hey, don't sweat the small stuff. Trust me.
Yeah.
I like I've seen the worst, and I some of these things you just need to let roll off your shoulders or roll off your back or whatever the case may be. Is there anything that like you can think of when you left that job? And we're going to talk about you leaving the job in a second, but that you could say, all right, this is what I picked up. This is a theme that I picked up that I can impart on somebody else. Again, kind of an unfair question.
I'd say you're never promised tomorrow, that you're never guaranteed that tomorrow's gonna come, sun's gonna come over the horizon, you're gonna open up your eyes, and you get another day to just live life. That's never promised, man. And so, just like everybody else, I lose, we all get caught in the day to day, and I lose sight of some things sometimes. Like, we all do, like, whether it's, you're busy, you're stressed, you're thinking about work or whatever, you're fussing at your kids or whatever. It's like tomorrow's not a given, man. It's not. So hug your kids, tell the people that you love them, and really enjoy the damn moments, because tomorrow might not be here. I mean, it's just is what it is, man. So none of us know what's going to happen at the end of this long journey, 60,
Mhm.
70 years down the road, 10 years, 15 years, whatever, you know. I think it really comes down to like you really have to put your entire soul into like every day that you're on this earth because you just never know.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of never knowing, you probably, when you were doing that job, never thought, well, I'm going to be a writer and a personality for Fantasy Pros. So I
Mhm.
am very curious, and I think a lot of people that are going to end up listening to this are going to be very curious because they, let's sort of level set with what this show is. I mean, I talk about creating habits and all that, but a lot of people listening want to know how to get to wherever they want to go. What you maybe they have a job and they just don't like it, but they just don't know how to transition. And listen, there's no like bulletproof plan, right? Like there's
Mhm.
no necessarily like roadmap that every single person can follow. It's not cookie cutter like that. But I'm just curious how you go from that to what you're doing now. I mean, obviously you have a passion for sports, you have a passion for
Mhm.
football specifically. What was that roadmap for you?
Jeez, man. Do you want the full on spiel about this? Do you want the cliff notes? How deep do you want me to go on this? See, I could
Eh,
talk for days, man.
Derek, listen, I am not short on time. So if you're
All
short on
right,
time, you can
let's
give me the
go.
cliff notes. If not, feel
Nah,
free to
nah.
dress it up.
Let's go. Let's go. I'll give you the long down and dirty with this. So, um, I think so. All of this started like whenever we moved from Louisiana to come to Dallas, and you move to a new part of the country and stuff like that, and like don't have a lot of friends, things like that, and hobbies wise, I was like, and I need something to fill the time, man. And I'd always been so obsessed with like fantasy sports, like. One of my brother-in-law got me into a league with a bunch of buddies and stuff from high school, and I was super obsessed. Like I'm sitting here like rocking my kids to sleep, sitting here working waivers and trades and crap. And I'm like, man, there's something wrong with me. I was checking my phone like every 10 minutes and I got so obsessed with it. And we ended up moving when we moved to Dallas and stuff. Like, I was like, I need something to fill the void. And I need something to just to fill some time here. Cause I was like, we didn't know a lot of people and stuff. And I was like, hey, just dive into like hobbies a little bit more and stuff. So, and it's something that my wife and I have always like done together, or we used to do it together, is that we would sit there and we watch like fantasy TV shows and stuff like that with Rank and Marcus Grant and everybody. And it was something we really got a lot of enjoyment out of. So when we moved here, I just had this like random thought idea one day. I was just like, man, you know what? Like I kind of bebop on fantasy Twitter. Like I'd hop on there and ask a question, tag an analyst or something, never get my question answered. And I was so into it. Like I was basically like all my lunch breaks at work, whatever, was always fantasy. Like I was either like looking at waivers or trades or stuff. Cause I've worked nights and I've worked days and stuff too. So putting in waivers while I had a lunch break during a nursing shift or something like that. And I got into the whole writing thing just because I was like, I need a hobby to sit here and kind of fill some time. And it's funny because like growing up and stuff, like whatever, like I've never been somebody that was like into English and stuff. Like I could tell you how many books I've read, and I'm gonna out myself as a total fake. All these books behind me right here, this is all my wife. My wife is an avid reader. She loves it. Like I think I've written I the only books on this shelf behind me are the publications I've actually written for that I can even claim.
Well,
None of the rest of that
just
is mine.
just like a look behind the curtain for everybody. All the books that are behind every analyst on any show, whether it's sports or otherwise, there's like 1% of the people that have actually read those books. So I understand that they're
It's
decorations.
true.
You have not
It's
outed
so
yourself.
true.
We get it.
It's so true, man. And so I started writing, like I went to the local Best Buy. I bought like the cheapest freaking Chromebook I could find just as something to write on. And I reached out to a few people that I followed or whatever in the industry, what and I was like, how do you get into doing this writing thing? And they kind of put me in touch with a few people. They're like, look, like, you probably need to like, they're going to ask you, like, do you have any kind of things that you could show us how you can write? And so like I wrote a few just articles on my own, and that entire process, it's like you don't start till you actually start, you know, and you don't know how you're going to even try to do it until you just try. And so how I was going to write that, what was I going to use to back up any argument, you know, it, because I'm a firm believer, and I still believe this, you got to show your work. Like, we all got opinions and gut feels and whatever, but the thing that matters is backing up those opinions with substantial actual data to say, this is what I think and this is why. Because everybody could just sit here and toss shit against the wall and sit here and be like, oh, well, we'll see what sticks. You
Right.
know, like, but starting that entire process, man, like I put out my first article. I started, and it evolved quickly. Like, from, I wrote for a small site that's now defunct. Although my dude Willie is still putting out, he sells draft kits and stuff like that, for a site called Fantasy Football 24/7. And as I kept writing and stuff like that, um, it pushed me into different areas of that. Like, I helped him run the site. I was an editor. I started podcasting. Um, I learned how to, and a lot of those things, and I think, like, we all have a somewhat of a similar background in that, Sia, and you can push back on this if I'm wrong, man, but, like, a lot of these skills that you try to cultivate to do this job, a lot of it is you just learn as you go, or you learn by, I Googled something, I YouTube something, like, in the sense of, like, I learned how to like edit audio and all those types of stuff, like, for podcasts, by trial and error, and by doing, and by watching a YouTube video and then just trying it, you know, and things like that. Like, and so that's how my original thing getting into fantasy kind of evolved. And from there, just kind of took on a life of its own. Like, I was just like, you know what? If I'm going to do this and I'm going to take the time to do this, then, and it was just like, you know, a little bit of extra money you spend on booze or something on the weekend. Like, you know, a lot of us, like, that you started writing on a per article basis, you didn't get paid anything. You didn't, I mean, hell, there's a lot of places I wrote for free, or I
Yeah.
wrote for like $5 an article or 10 or whatever, you know. And I'm not saying that, like, that's a must. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just imparting what my journey through all this looked like. And for me, after a while, you know, whether it's like you got so many followers, or you're trying to do this or that or whatever, and like, my eventual became, okay, I want to write, and I'm not, like, from, like, looking at it like so much like an assassin, like, I wasn't like a gun for hire, but like, the other side of it, I was like, I want to keep trying to push the envelope on this. Like, can I write for this bigger site or that bigger site and that bigger site to get my work out there and have people be able to read it, you know, bigger platforms and stuff. And really, that just kind of became the onus of it. Like, I was like, okay, I'm just going to keep trying to move up, and wherever this goes is where it goes. You know, I was like, there's no way, man. Like, there's no way that I'll get to doing this full time. There's no way I'll ever call this my job. But you know what? Like, I'm having fun with it, and I'm just going to put some effort into it. And if I can even make this like a side hustle to where, like, hell, this pays for Christmas every year with my family. Cool. Yahtzee. Like, that's
Yeah.
great. You know, and it just kept snowballing, man. Like, I'd reach out to DMs for people and be like, look, like, if you have an opening, not like cold DMing people, but like relationships. Like, maybe they followed me because of a conversation that we had about a player or whatever. You know, I still remember doing my first ever spot on Sirius Radio. My hands were all sweaty. I felt like I was about to shit my pants. I was so freaking nervous. But that all came, and bless his soul, Paul Kelly, I just jumped into his DMs because he had him open one day, who works for Fantasy Points. And I was like, look, man, like, I don't even know if this is a possibility. Here's an article that I've written. Here's something I've done. If you ever need a guest or whatever, and I'm not like, I'm just throwing this out there. It would be amazing if I could hop on the air with you for a little bit. And he was gracious enough to reach back out to me, but like, yeah,
Wow.
sure. Like, let's do this, you know? And I was like,
So
holy crap, man.
so let me stop you there, because that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Okay.
Because I think there's the story of, well, how did you graduate from this regular job or no job to what you actually wanted to do,
Mm-hmm.
to me, there's always in anybody's story, there's always a differentiator. Maybe it's just that they just had such a bubbly personality. Maybe they were so dialed in and they hit all their bets, or they were so good at whatever it is that they were trying to do. But it seems to me, and this hasn't come up yet on any of the shows that we've done, that your differentiator was quite literally, well, I shouldn't say literally, but you said it yourself, pushing the envelope. And I think a lot of people, they just don't do that because, and we had David Meltzer on earlier, who's an entrepreneur and a motivational speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always preach, and he always preaches. I'm actually going to see him tomorrow in Miami, as a matter of fact. He always preaches, ask for help, always ask for help. And you weren't necessarily, quote, asking for help, but you were just kind of putting your stuff out there. And I think a lot of people, when they get to a spot, they just kind of sit in that spot and they wait for somebody to reach into the spot and pull them out and pull them up, if you will. And what you did, and I think this is so important. Listen, I don't know if you realize what you have access to. I'm not talking to you, Derek. I'm talking to anybody that's ever going to listen to this. There's this thing, it's called a computer, and there's this other thing, it's called social media. And you can literally reach out to anybody. And the thing is, not everybody's going to respond. But in
Yep.
Derek's case, a couple people responded, if not more. And it allowed him to graduate to levels that he didn't think he was ever going to graduate to. But there's no way for him to know if he never reached out in the first place.
No,
And
you
Derek,
got
I
to keep
think
trying, man.
exactly.
You got to keep trying, and it's funny you bring that up because I'm tying things together in my head as you're going through it, Sia. And yeah, I mean, a lot of the best opportunities I've ever had, and some of the connections and friends I've made along the way, have been just because of random conversations. Like, I still remember getting my first, what I felt like was a consistently paying gig for now a defunct site, but my dude Elliot Christ put out a tweet or whatever, and I'd known Elliot through like a friend of a friend, and he put out a tweet one day. It was just like, look, like, I've got this announcement coming or whatever, kind of like forecasting, like eventually, like, he had something he was going to announce about doing something in the sports space, and that it was going to allow him to, like, do it as a job. And so, like, I DM'd him one day, and I was like, look, man, I was like, congrats on what you got coming up. I've really respected your work, and I wasn't blowing smoke up his ass. Like, I was like, I really respect your work. I've read a few different things that you've done and stuff like that, and your takes are always sharp. And I was like, if you need anybody with whatever's going on, or if you need something, you have an opportunity. I said, like, I was like, look, like, here's an article that I wrote. It was it's funny, man, because that article aged so poorly, but it was right after Alvin Kamara's rookie season. And it was like the whole entire debate around the industry that at that time was like, he can't keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
He can't reproduce this insane ceiling or season that he had in his rookie year. And I wrote an article that is still floating out there in the ether. If you Google, it's like, you can Google like Alvin Kamara, like dynasty or whatever. And he read it and he was like, and what I didn't know at the time, he read that and he bounced that article off of a few people he knew and respected in the industry. And yeah, it's been through making connections. I mean, just talking to people, asking, like, and sometimes you ask the question, sometimes the answer is going to be no. Like,
Right, of course.
that just, it happens, man.
Mm-hmm.
But like, some of those, like, a lot of those interactions that have not like just paved the way for me, but have given me opportunities to where it's like, look, through all of this, I've always tried to continue to it's been really like two things that roll around in my head constantly. And one of those is that you're going to have a really damn hard time outworking me. Like, you might
Mm-hmm.
try, but very few people are going to freaking outwork me. I'm going to work my ass off. And that's just how it is. I'm like, I might not be the most eloquent, the most well-spoken. I might not be the prettiest. I know this is a radio face, but I'm going to sit here and work my ass off for what I want to try to get to and what I want. And the other part about that is to try to continue to learn and grow and really, like, I've always thought about it, and I still think about it today in the fantasy space, that if I get to a point where I feel like I've got my process. There's nothing else to learn. There's nothing else for me to continue to push and to get better, to be better, to learn more about whatever it is revolving around this game, data, analytics, all that type of stuff that I can utilize for my job. If I ever get to that point where I'm like, I can't learn anything else, that's where you get passed by. That's
Mhm.
where, if you're not continuing to push yourself and to keep growing, you're dying. Like,
Yeah.
you're gonna get passed by, you're gonna lose your spot, and that's what's up, And so that's what kind of keeps fueling me to keep looking at different things and trying different things and pushing the envelope for all of it, man. And yeah, I know I'm kind of rambling here, but I think a lot of this comes down to, and I mentioned it a few different times, is just relationships and people. And this is not, and I'm going to bring this up, and I want to sit here and be very, very clear about this. I'm not bringing up his name because I happen to work at Fantasy Pros. I am bringing up Mike Tagliaro's name because I will never be able to repay that man for the kindness that he showed me multiple times in multiple years. Um, I was just starting to write, and I'd followed Tags's work since I even started having an idea about fantasy, like not writing, just liking fantasy. And he had his own site at the time with his wife. And I followed his work over the years. And yeah, he went to Fantasy Pros. And I DM'd him one time. And this is right after I started to write in the industry. And I was working on this stat series. I can't even remember what it was I called it the road to 320, and basically it was 10 stats on every single team out there. And I sent him one of the teams, and I said, I would really appreciate it if you could give me any kind of feedback with this. Like, if it's terrible, tell me it's terrible.
Mhm.
If it's not, and that's one of the things. Like, how many times have you ever asked? And I'll throw this to you, Sia. How many times have you ever asked a family member, somebody else, for feedback upon something you've done? And 9 times out of 10, and correct me if I'm wrong, "Oh, that's good. Yeah, yeah,
It's rubber
no.
stamp. Yeah.
I think it's really good, it's well written. You did a good job, blah, blah, blah." Just like face level, and I'm not saying it's face level BS, but not like constructive criticism is how you're
Yeah.
going to grow and get better, and hearing the things that a lot of people don't want to hear, that's how you learn and you continue to improve yourself.
Mhm.
If you're told that you're a finished product and everything's great, how does that help you? And Tags like reached back out to me, and he never had to if he would have not have, like you were talking about, if he would have never DM'd me back, I would have understood it. I wouldn't have
Mhm.
said, "Oh, he was an a-hole, like, forget that dude, blah, blah, blah." I would have never thought that, but he did. And he DM'd me back this laundry list of things about how, like, I could improve what I was doing. And it floored me, man. Like, I was like, because up until that point, nobody had told me that.
Mhm.
I had gotten the, "Oh, it's good. That's nice," but all that kind of lip service BS. But that's not what helps people. And
Yeah.
so I will never be able to repay him for that type of constructive criticism, as well as I didn't know about this until after his passing. But like the article that I had sent to Elliot Chris to get a job with him way back in the day, Elliot had forwarded said article to Mike Tagliere.
Mm.
And he had been like, "No, he's awesome. He's great." Put in like this amazing word for me behind the scenes. I had never even known that happened until one day, like Elliot and I were talking on the phone, and we just sharing stories about it because we were processing dealing with his passing and stuff. And it's like those types of things, like I'll never be able to say thank you for that. But that's really what it comes down to, man. It's not only are you willing to work your ass off, but relationships, and I really think like continuing to push yourself.
Well, you just did say thank you because I think Tags, who I didn't know personally on any level, when he passed, I saw all the messages just emanating from social media, and
Mhm.
I think it's really cool that I'm sure he left a bunch of legacies. But me, as somebody who never knew him, uh, you know, the fact that he left the type of legacy that could have you speak what you just spoke for the last, you know, few minutes, that is a legacy. And I think if we're to leave something behind, it's very hard to do that. The fact that he was able to leave that behind to not just you, but like basically the entire Twitter/fantasy community, I think that is like such an amazing legacy for him to have left. And I'll tell you this, when it comes to constructive criticism, this is something I try to always do for myself. I always want to surround myself by supporters and not cheerleaders. And there's a
Yep.
big chasm between those two groups of people, because the
Yep.
cheerleader, well, they're just going to cheer you on the whole time. Mom
It's
and
yes
dad are just going
people.
to cheer
Just
you on the
yes
whole
people.
time.
All they're gonna do is pat your butt and tell you yes.
Exactly. The
Does not help you.
supporters are not supporting everything you have to say. They're supporting
Mhm.
your goal. And if they're supporting your goal, they are going to be willing to offer you the constructive criticism it takes to achieve that goal. So again, I really think when you surround yourself with people, I think if you want to advance, they need to be goal oriented and they need to be supporting your ultimate goal, not just every single thing that you put out. So I really like that point that you brought up, Derek. Can I ask you, because one thing I'm not sure about,
Mhm.
like, how did you go from pediatric oncology to fantasy pros? What was the transition there like?
So, I I mean, to be honest, I kept diving more and more into fantasy, and I'm telling you, like, I would use I'd use lunch breaks at work to I like, on my lunch break, I go walk outside and I do, like, a podcast guest spot or something, or I'd work on on an article. Or if I had built into my day to leave work early, it wasn't to leave work early to go home, it was leave work early to go sit in the hospital cafeteria and to go write an article before I went home, with the wife and the kids and stuff, So I think it pushed from being something that I cared about strongly as a hobby, and I'm not gonna say an obsession, but, like, I was prioritizing that over some other things in my life
Mhm,
because I was so passionate about what I was doing, and to me, I started to feel, and this is not, like, while I was still in pediatric oncology, like, after that, I gotten into management and program coordination and a few of the different things, but I had gotten to the point where I don't say feel more alive, but I felt more fulfilled by
mhm,
writing a football article than I did putting in an 8 or 12-hour day at a hospital.
mhm,
And I was like, eventually that switch kind of flipped for me. And I was like, man, you know what? Like, it started to get into a realm of like doing this for so long and writing at so many different places and getting enough exposure that I was like, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna toss my hat in the ring. Like, I want to apply for one of these jobs,
mhm,
and I don't know if I'm ever gonna get it, but it's not gonna be for lack of trying." And for me, I think and I'm not gonna say the aha moment, but like where it kind of pushed into a different realm. I went through a really, really tough working situation, at a hospital. I had never worked in like a toxic work environment in my life, and I got to experience that unfortunately firsthand. And it got so bad to the point that like I was a firm believer in you do, and I still am, that you do things the right way. If you're going to leave a job, then you give them 2 weeks notice. You allow like for you're not going to leave somebody high and dry.
mhm,
I was so just emotionally ransacked at that point. I just like I crafted an email and you know what I was like, it felt like the job was eventually going down the tube. I was like, man, I feel like they're just gonna fire me. Not that I agree with what they're doing or why or whatever, but I feel like they're gonna fire me. And I was like, you know what? Screw this, man. I'm taking my life back. Whatever. I crafted an email. I was sitting at the computer towards the end of my workday, sent the email, which basically just detailed like, I'm done. This is my last
mhm,
day. Peace out. I'm gone. I was like, I'm taking my life back. I'm going to sit here I had made this conscious decision. I was like, I'm tired of being miserable, man. I was so burnt out doing medicine and everything, and I felt like I'd lost my way so much in that it wasn't what I'd originally gotten into to do it, that I was like, this is not healthy for me anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I need to make a change in my life. And so I put in my resignation, I walked out. I went through about 6 months of being out of a job. Um, and I tried to get other jobs. I tried to kick it around. And eventually I was like, you know what? I'm in between stuff. I can't seem to get another nursing job. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do this fantasy stuff like a day to day.
Mhm.
Like, until I get another job, I'm going to pretend like this is my job and I'm going to sit here and work. And I want to work as hard as I would as if I was working and doing this for a living.
Mhm.
And one thing led to another, and I eventually, because of the connections that I had made and stuff like that, I had Elliot and some other people in the industry reach out to me and be like, "Well, you know, I've got some things going on. Would you like to come do this as your job?" And I was like, I mean, where do I sign? Do I sign in blood? Like, how does that work? Like, what do you mean? Like, come on, like, am I getting punked here? Like, this can't be real. And it's just, it all comes down, man. Like, I still think I'm dealing with some of those emotional scars, even from way back when still. But I eventually made the choice that, and this is something like ever since then, as my kids get older, I've got a 13-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 6-year-old, 5-year-old, excuse me. The one thing that I preach, especially to my older two right now, and I think that we're in a really an interesting spot in the world now, is that you don't have to be married to this cookie cutter life nowadays. You
Mhm.
don't have to be married to, and I don't, how old are you, Sia?
45.
Okay. So when I grew up, and I'm almost 40, when you grew up, a lot of it was the expectation of, okay, you go to high school, you go to college, you get your degree, blah blah blah. Maybe you go to get your master's, whatever, and you go to work, and that's life.
Mhm.
We are at a beautiful spot in the world where that doesn't have to be your story, and that doesn't
Right.
have to be the story that you write for yourself. Like, whether it's social media, small business, websites that allow you to run said small businesses.
Mhm.
Like, there are so many different ways for people to carve their own path in this world that, honestly, man, like, what I tell my kids on a daily basis is, I don't care what you do for a job when you get older. All I ask is that you work hard and you're passionate about what you do. If you hate your job, you don't need to be doing it.
Right.
This life's too damn short to be that miserable, man. We
Mhm.
spend more time on a daily basis working than we do sleeping, spending time with our family, anything like that. So, do you want to be miserable as shit for half of your life? No. So I'm just like, you work hard and you be passionate about what you do. And if you do those two things, a lot of the time, the rest of that stuff takes care of itself, man.
Yeah.
And like, that's really something that, like, I subscribe to doing this now, and I'm trying to impart that to my kids because they could grow, like, they could open a YouTube account and end up like that's their job on a daily basis, like YouTube making pies or whatever, or a
Mhm.
baking, like their own small business, whatever. Like, I mean, I think like you and I are a perfect example of like, just because you go to school for certain things, like I went to school for nursing. Hell, I was in nurse practitioner school for a while. There was a time where I was about a year away from getting my nurse practitioner license, and I was going to go do palliative care and things for St. Jude.
Mhm.
But like all these different things changed. Like, you keep your story's never finished and never written. You're the only person that could paint yourself into this corner of, I got this degree and I have to keep doing this.
Yeah.
I was like, No, I don't want to do that anymore. Like,
Well,
I'm
the
tired of
problem,
being miserable.
you're preaching to the choir on the social norms thing, because the problem is people, just whether they're conscious of it or not, they're just falling into these social norms. And whether it's they don't want to disappoint themselves or their parents or the people that have put the thrust those expectations upon them, which is just really society as a whole, if we're being honest, they just
Well, and
fall
then you get in
into it.
life situations like where you have a family to account for and things like that. So some of the maneuverability you have at certain points of life is
True.
a little bit different. But still, I don't disagree with you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, no. I mean, but that's just really the bottom line. I mean, I think people think because they've invested so much time in a certain thing. I mean, listen, I went to undergrad, I went to law school for 3 years, I practiced law for 13 years. Imagine me telling my father, who helped me out, by the way, paying for said school, "Hey, I
Mhm.
don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something completely different that does not utilize any sort of the education that I spent the last 13, 15 years doing." So it's one of those things, though. For me, it was an easy decision because I had abandoned those social norms a long time ago.
Yep.
And I knew, like you, Derek, I knew I was going to work hard in whatever I was going to choose to do because I knew I was going to be passionate about doing
Yep.
it. And so I
Yeah.
think that's the
And
thing. It's easy to say, like, oh, just do what you're passionate about. But the truth is, if you're passionate about it, you are going to pour more of yourself into
yep.
it. And if you pour more of yourself into it, then you're naturally probably going to be way better at that thing than the thing that you've kind of like forced
Mhm.
yourself to do begrudgingly.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. And I think that it's really a testament to like, it's scary, man. It's scary to sit here and try to, break out of what you've always done into something else. But eventually it comes down to like, you know, my wife and I have always talked about it. Like, there's so many different things that you can try to push for in this world. And you could have all the money in the world and it still ain't going to make you happy.
Mhm.
Like, it might offer you more comfort or the ability to focus on things that maybe allow you to be happier, but it doesn't mean you're going to be happy.
Yeah.
So I eventually just made the choice. And I think it's so much, I'm not going to say it's an easier choice, but there are more avenues to try to realize a dream now than 5 years ago, 10 years ago, than there ever was when we were growing up. And I think that, like,
Yeah.
to me, that matters, man. And it's just like, just be passionate about what you do. And like, past that, you're the only person that can set those limits for yourself. You know, I could sit here and tell you right now, and it's not just my own drive, but along the way, and I can't speak for your journey, but for me, the other part about it is having people. You talked about having supporters. I would not be sitting here having this interview with you and us discussing all of these things if it was not for my amazingly supportive wife
Yeah.
supporting me through like
Same here.
times where like I didn't even think I could do it. And she's like, "No, this is good. You can do it." I had family members like laughing at me when I was like, it was just like a joke. Oh, you think you're going to go right or whatever, like, man, that's never going to happen. Come on. Like, what are you really going to apply for a job to do? And it's like, there's a lot of people in this world that could sit here and kick you when you're down and stuff.
Mhm.
But the ones that try to help you up whenever you need it or support you through all of that stuff. Because I went through a really dark time when I didn't have a damn job for 6 months, man. Like, you started getting all those personal and inner demons telling you like one thing or another. And that's like when I referenced earlier being at, halfway through a bottle and 2 a.m. And I'm like, oh, delete Twitter. That's when I was there, man. And my
Yeah.
wife's like, no, like you need to sit here and get your stuff together. Like, that's not what you're going to do. And having not only a support system, but also understanding that in this day and age, you can carve your own path if you're sitting here willing to work for it and you're passionate enough about it. I firmly believe that.
The other thing too, Derek, is that, it's very easy for us to say, and I've lived this experience, so I feel comfortable saying this, and it sounds like you have too, Derek. It's very easy for me to say, hey, abandon your cookie cutter job that you don't like and throw yourself into something you're passionate
Mhm.
about. Like that doesn't exactly pay the bills right away. But what I will say is, don't tell me you don't have enough time to do both, because sometimes you might have to do both. You might have to
Oh,
like retain that sort of momentum from an income standpoint and do those things that you're passionate about just to like try to get a leg up before you fully immerse yourself in. I literally worked two jobs for 3 years. After the law stuff,
Yep.
I did pharma, and then I was doing this, and I was trying to do this full time, and I was, doing work while I was doing pharma. And then after pharma, I was, doing shows at night, and I was doing all those things, by the way, with 2 kids, with no
Uh-huh.
help from family because they don't live in South Florida. They live in the
Yep.
DC area. No nanny, no nothing. And by the way, all the while, my wife has just completed 2 bikini bodybuilding. It's really just bodybuilding competitions, but bikini division
Awesome.
because she's slighter than some of the bigger girls. But my point is, she's gotten back-to-back overall wins just in the last 2 weekends with the same limitations that I just
Awesome.
set out that I had for myself. And that is a very time-intensive thing from a diet and a performance standpoint. So my
Oh,
point
man,
is,
absolutely.
there is no excuse of I don't have time to do it,
Nope,
because you can if you really want to do something, you can always make time, even if
you
some
can.
of that time is spent doing a job that you don't like. Carve out both paths and then figure it out along the way.
I was just about to tell you that, like, yeah, like, I basically worked, like, 70, 80 hours a week for 3 years of doing this part-time, like,
Yeah.
I but again, I wanted to do that. Like, I mean, I remember, like, I was working for the Locked On Network and doing their fantasy show, and I'm sitting here like, I've got to get up and I've got a presentation for work the next day. But also I just did a podcast and I'm up until 3 a.m. editing that while I'm also editing a PowerPoint that I've got to give the next day. It's like, it all comes down to how bad do you freaking want it,
Right.
and you
And
can
but
make
but Derek, it's
excuses.
not just that. It's also being able to overcome those moments that you had, that I also had, where you feel that weakness and you feel that, like,
Yeah,
well, it's actually
true.
just easier to just go back to this thing that I don't really love doing very much.
Yeah.
Moving, like, because those moments happen often, and you just
Mhm.
have to get past them. You have to know that you're different. Like, you have to at least tell yourself that you're different. You can do what other people are telling you or belittling, you, saying, maybe that's not the path for you. So I
Mhm.
feel like getting through those steps, that's how you get from step 1 to step 20. Is, along the way, you are going to have some rough patches, and you have to work through them. Derek, a couple
Mhm.
more questions before I get you out of here. um so I think you're very successful, whatever, like, that's such a loaded word. Success can
Mhm.
be defined by anything. It's certainly not just limited to monetary stuff or anything like that. But with
Mhm.
all that said, I don't know, Derek, if you have future goals in the future. Given that this is like a goal-oriented show, I'm just curious. Have you kind of reached where you want to be, and maybe you just want to sort of have more stature or rise in that sort on that level? Or is there something that Derek Brown wants to do in the future that is, a little bit more, a little bit extra?
I mean, for me, it's a continuation of all these different things. Yeah. Whether that comes down to building building the following, to continue to build that, building multiple platforms, allowing myself to have a type of reach, or at least hopefully a reach to where, really, for me, it's sustainability a lot now. And how do I stay at the top of my game, or
Mhm.
try to? And to this point, like, how do I carve myself a path where I'm still doing this in my 50s? You know? And to me, that matters. And whether that's building up a large enough platform, putting myself out there on big enough spaces and things like that. I've got aspirations, like eventually maybe doing TV work, things
Yeah.
like that,
You'd be
like we
great.
all.
You'd be great with that, for the record.
Ah,
Like, I could see
man,
you on, like, a
too
Pat
kind.
McAfee type program, honestly. You'd kill it.
Too kind. Too kind, man. For me, that's really kind of what pushes me now, is to also become a better student of the game. So for me, it's like I deal with imposter syndrome on a daily basis. Okay, well, how do I quell that demon? How do I shut it up?
Mhm.
Okay, well, part of it is one of the things, and this is amazing. Like, Fantasy Pros is helping me realize that dream. I'm actually doing the scouting academy starting this month, so getting
Wow.
trained to actually watch, film and things like that. An
That's
opportunity I
awesome.
would not have outside of, with my job right now, but taking those opportunities and saying, what are the holes in my game? Can I get better at using analytics? Can I get better? Like, my short term and long term goals now are continue to build platform, continue to build my following, also continue learning. And so what does that look like? Doing scouting academy, taking a course on R coding, learning how to code, things like that. And it's like basically continuing to add tools to the tool belt to where, because one of the things when I got into this, man, was also like, I want to make myself as well-rounded and as nuanced and well-versed as I possibly can on all of these different things about fantasy and football. So where if somebody were to come to me and say, part of your job today, oh, okay, on today's platter for your NFL content, you are going to write a baseball article. Okay, I can do that. Today's article, you're going to write about coverage schemes. Okay, I can do that. Today, you're going to have to write about NFL draft players. I can do that. Like, the thing for me is I never wanted a job, like a company to come to me and say, can you do this? I never want to say the word no.
Yeah.
I want to be like, you're damn right I can do that. And I'm going to do it better than somebody else. And I'm going to sit here and try to do it the best I can. It might not be the best, but it's not going to suck. And if it's not the best, you damn right I'm going to try to do it better the next time.
Yeah. Lean on me. I totally get that. And by the way, the best way to, I mean, first of all, on this very show, I've heard the term imposter syndrome more than a few times. And these are from people that are really well versed in their fields. And I just think it's one of those things, because you want to be so good at your craft. It's just you innately question how good you are because you're striving to be so much better, and you know there's so much more room to grow. And I think that is like a typical byproduct of imposter syndrome, is having that person be the same person who has a thirst for knowledge because they know how much they don't know, or they have an idea at least of how much they don't know. So I think imposter syndrome is pervasive in a lot of personalities that are like some of the best ones out there. So the only way to defeat that is with knowledge. And it sounds like that's exactly the path you're on. Before I get you out of here, Derek, there's a question I ask every single guest before I let them go. And it's the following. If there were 3 people that you could thank right now on this show, they could be alive or now past, that you would say helped you to be the person you are today, or to have gotten you to the place you are today, who would those 3 people be? And you are not allowed to say your wife, because
Damn it.
I've been paying attention, and I know she would probably be the first one, especially as
that was the
supportive as
first one
she
I was going to go with, man.
Well,
You cut my legs out from under me. All right.
my show, my rules. It can't, no immediate family. I don't even want you to thank your 3
Love
kids.
it. Love
No
it.
immediate
Okay.
family.
So Mike Tagliere be 1. Elliot Christ, I've already brought him up here. I love that man like a brother. He is number 2. And number 3 is probably my colleague in arms, Joe Pisapia. And I'm going to bring up Joe, and I have not talked about Joe. I love giving Joe 7 types of hell on our shows. I love that man so much. But when I talked about earlier about 2 a.m. and considering hanging it all up, when I woke up the next morning, I just happened to stumble into a conversation through DMs and text messages with Joe about fantasy and stuff. And I still thank him to this day for this, and I'll continue to do it because it matters. Is that I called him out of the blue, and we had a conversation for about an hour, hour and a half. And I was like, I don't know what to do anymore, man. Like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. I don't know what I want to do. Like, I'm just in a bad headspace. And that conversation kept me pushing forward, kept me doing all this. And I never would have reached any of this. And I never will reach any of the things that I possibly will do in the next 6 months, year, 5 years without that conversation. So it's Tags, it's Elliot Christ, and it's Joe EP.
Can you sum up for us, maybe as whether it's a theme or a couple of words or sentences that would sort of encompass why he was able to impact you so much on that phone call?
I think part of it was like, let me know that it's okay to feel like that, and that he had been there before too, and that he made it through it. and having that type of hope, or at least helping me to see the light when I couldn't, spoke volumes, man. I'm gonna like tear up and start crying or some shit right now, like just telling the story, because it was such it was a really tough time.
So, what's interesting about that comment, I think it's a good place to leave the conversation, is that a lot of times when people are down, whether it's because they're down from a personal standpoint or career standpoint or all of the above, all things included, a lot of times people in that down feeling, they feel alone. They feel like they're the only
Mhm.
ones fraught with those feelings. And the
Yep.
truth is, on a very daily basis, like there are so many people. If we're looking at a pie chart, there's that pie chart is full 50 to 75% of people who are having those same doubts, those same feelings, maybe not in that exact moment, but certainly near to that moment. So I feel like Joe made a really good impact, but it's just a really good insight, because no matter how successful you are now, and I don't mean you, I mean anybody, those moments of success are also met with moments of fear and depression and just generally being down on yourself. So,
Sorry, my camera is doing a dance right now because my dog, who always sits at my feet every show because she has to be in this room, has decided she wanted to like try to walk under the camera. So if anybody at home is wondering what the hell is going on, yeah, that's what's up.
what's your dog's name?
She is actually our brand new 14-year-old rescue. Her name is Bailey.
See, the rep just keeps getting better. A 14-year-old rescue. All right.
Yep.
Well, that's actually really just a perfect way to end the show, actually. Derek Brown, who I already thought extremely high of, and after listening to him for the last hour, I continue to think high of, rescues 14-year-old dogs. That's, obviously that dog has a little bit of time left and gets the loving embrace of Derek and his family. So that's really cool. And I love what you said about Joey P, because I don't know Joey P, so I feel weird even saying his name like that. Um, but the point is, that, listen, we have those down moments, and without the Joey P's in the world, we stay down. And that's something that we've talked about with Jonathan Coachman. That was something very specifically that I talked about with him when he was on this very show, Sia Nejad Sports. Derek, anything I left off the table? Is there anything? I mean, it sounds like we covered everything. I took so much of your time. I
No,
appreciate
man.
you coming on.
I mean, I tried to, I told you before we were going to do this and stuff, man. I'm an open book. So for me, it's just, you bare your soul and see what comes out, man. I think we covered all parts and pieces and things about what, the last few years has looked like for me. And, I know, but we're coming to the end here, but I definitely want to extend this before we get off air is thank you, man. Thank you for reaching out through all these different opportunities and shows and things like that. You're really damn good at your job.
Appreciate that, Derek. And I appreciate you coming on to Sia Nejad Sports. I appreciate everybody in the chat, including Goat's Head Fool, who I believe is new to this chat. I think I've seen you on the early edge before. But listen, everybody, if you're listening to this now or perhaps later, please subscribe to the channel. We have a ton of I just booked a couple of guests to come on over the next couple of weeks. I think I'm going to do another collab with Pamela Maldonado. Last time we did a collab, we had Daniel Negreanu on. So you can catch that on my YouTube channel as well, or at sianejadsports.com. Got content on both sides. Derek, thank you so much for coming on to Sia Nejad Sports. I honestly think this was an amazing conversation. And I think those of you that have listened to it, I think you can really take some things away here in terms of if you're having some issues in terms of how to guide yourself in the future. I think this was really shed a lot of light on maybe what you should do. I love the pushing the envelope part too, Derek. All right. My name is Sia Nejad. That right there, he's Derek Brown. You can catch him at dbro_FFB on Twitter. And we'll see you next time on Sia Nejad Sports.